Welcome to the World Builders Anvil, episode 265. I am the law.
Don't know where to start building your fantasy world?
Do you need more? Does it make sense?
Forget any worries and become a crafter of imagination.
This is the place where we will prime your mind.
Now, it's time to heat up the forge.
Break out the mithril ingots and hammer.
Welcome to the World Builders Anvil. I'm Jeffrey W. Ingram.
And I'm Michael Miller.
Let's sup from the mug of Java and build.
Welcome back, and judging you, today I am Judge Ingram.
And dreadfully yours, I am Michael Miller.
For those of you who don't get the reference at the beginning, I am actually referencing Judge Dredd, who is the law. And just as a quick warning, we both love Judge Dredd.
Big fans.
We've not had the time or money to obsess over Judge Dredd at this point. So,
the unfortunate truth is that my exposure to Judge Dredd was extremely limited as far as the comic book is concerned.
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of the Carl Urban Judge Dredd. I liked the Stallone Judge Dredd.
Was that the 2012 one?
It's the only other one.
Okay, there's only two. Yeah, because the newer one, I thought I read like some of the comics, but they weren't in order, and I don't know, what time frame they took place in. So most of my reference are the two movies. From the little bit I read the comics, the second movie to me was more kind of how I felt the world felt like.
Oh yeah, the second one seems a lot more faithful to the comic books.
Yes, a lot of this research about the world of Judge Dredd, which is what we're talking about today, I have to give a huge shout out to the Judge Dredd wiki and Wikipedia, because that's kind of where I was doing a lot of research to get some more details on stuff, looking for sort of the world building elements. But, I think the first thing is, let's try and genreify this one, because I don't think it's quite as simple. Some people will call it like a post-apocalyptic dystopian type of thing, which is all fair.
Is dystopian fair?
You don't find the world dystopian-like?
I mean, I guess. It almost seems the thing
One man's dystopia is another man's utopia, so I don't know. So,
okay. Post-apocalyptic, I guess, is fair. I don't know how the Judge Dredd world came to be. So I was unaware that there was an apocalypse.
Yeah, there's wastelands. That's where the mutants came from.
Okay.
So mutants are sometimes villains, sometimes sympathetic, group of people who are oppressed.
And can we assume that is like nuclear fallout mutants?
I believe so. I'm not 100% positive on what it was, but I believe it was I know there was a Great War of 2050. So we're rapidly.
We're getting there. Yeah. 30 years.
And I believe it was a nuclear war, although I'm not 100% positive. Definitely post-apocalyptic. There's definitely like a Shadowrun feel from doing some of my research, which one thing, and I agree, Michael and I talked about a little bit prepping for the episode, is there's magic in the world with Judge Dredd. I did not know that.
I didn't either. Like, I was aware that there's psionics, but when you said, like, I was looking at your show notes and it mentioned magic, and I was like, there's magic in Judge Dredd? Again, having not spent any real time with the comic book, I might have known that had I, gotten to read more of them, but I did not know that. I thought there was just like psionics, and even psionics seemed rare, at least in the movie. That seemed like a very special thing.
It seemed like a very special thing. And implants, so a cybernetic thrust to it. So to me, it's kind of like
it screams Shadowrun. All of this screams
Shadowrun meets or arrests Hunger Games is kind of the way I'm thinking about it. Except instead of districts, you have city blocks, which I think for this one, I'm going to kind of start more on the detail and kind of work towards the world, because I'm a little more familiar with some of the detailed aspects of it.
Okay.
I'm less familiar as it goes out. Now, city blocks are sort of the foundation of what they call mega cities. And essentially every city block has everything a person needs. You would never need to leave your city block. Hospital, work, everything is supposed to be there. Now, typically, from my understanding, is it's a high unemployment situation in the megacity. The one I'm most familiar with is Megacity 1.
Which is where Judge Dredd lives.
Which is where Judge Dredd works and operates out of. But there are other megacities as well, too.
Hence the number.
I don't know if they all use numbers, but Megacity 1 was I believe the first actual megacity. I know
also makes sense.
Kind of do some research. It looks like, in general, you could say the nation states have broken down. There are maybe some areas where it's less densely populated that aren't wasteland, but they're not megacities either. Probably like northern Canada, it might be fine. But it's not a megacity setup, so there still might be a more of what we think of a traditional nation state. Do
you have an idea how large megacities are? Because like in Shadowrun, the concept of a sprawl, it's basically the entire eastern seaboard, the entire western seaboard is one city, like many cities that have expanded and grown into each other, so that you have a nonstop metropolis from Maine to Florida and the northern western side of the country down to Mexico.
Yes, and I don't know what number, like in real life, I believe they consider a megacity around 10 million people, but these are much, much larger than that. Because like you said, it's like, I think Megacity 1 is like the Northeast United States and a good chunk, if not all of the East Coast. So, it's, and every block is, probably, tens of thousands of people. So, as to see, how large is Megacity 1? Let's see if I can Google this real quick.
I would just be curious if they're like, is it that they are, because based on the movie, it seems like it's very large vertically, but not super large geographically.
Oh no, it's super large geographically. It does cover most of the East Coast. Sort of like a sprawl would in.
Okay. So again, there's another big similarity to Shadowrun.
Yeah. And I think in a lot of cyberpunk ones, cities have a tendency to grow. And if you think about, it's like, the United States is, we call them megapolises, but, in a way from DC to Boston is approaching that kind of a situation at this point where there's very little rural left in between. There are some areas of suburban, but you have lots of cities and population in a very small area of the United States. To put it into context, I think Hillary Clinton won, I think, like around 500 to 600 counties out of several thousand counties in the United States, but she had 2 million more in the popular vote than Trump did. So, she had a very small geographical area, but it was in the population.
The denser populated areas. Which, I mean, that wasn't I certainly didn't question that being a characteristic of Megacity 1. It's very, very apparent that they are extremely densely populated areas because in addition to their sprawling geographic, mass.
Well, one other thing, maybe one of the listeners can, go to facebook.com/groups/undercropped or reach out to us on social media and let us know. I'm not sure Megacity is all these blocks and that's all there is. To me, I think wherever people live are in megacities. There might be green zones in there as well too with farming. I don't understand how and where the food comes from.
I don't know if that's ever really addressed.
I don't know if it's really addressed. It's something I thought about, and I thought you could have green zones if you force people into areas that then have green zones around it. But my feeling from reading the comics and seeing the movies, it's like all city. And so,
while you mention the undercroft, do you mind if I interrupt our thought here for a few minutes to do some shout outs? Because I realized I meant to do it at the beginning and I forgot.
Hit it up.
Okay, so a bunch of people have joined the Facebook our close Facebook group, Fantasy World Builders Undercroft. So we just want to shout them out. Thank them for joining and welcome them on the show. So I have, it's either Tone or Tony, Tone, Harold, Ward. What was the one that you looked up for me?
Guillaume, I believe.
Guillaume, Jonathan, Eric, Paige, Firelord, Alexander.
Firelord's his real name because it's a Facebook name.
Of course, that's real. Alexander, Alex, W. Lewis, Patrick, Joseph, Ryan, Maddie, William, Matthew, Lacree, Austin, and Ariel. So welcome to the closed Facebook group, guys. Thank you so much for joining, and we certainly appreciate your company.
This also shows why that we try and do it weekly, but we often forget. But when we don't, it's growing faster at this point, so they build up a lot quicker now.
Definitely.
So we actually now get punished for that. So.
Well, I don't mind waiting a few shows and then just putting a whole bunch of names up. I kind of like that more than just like one or two names. I think it's fun when there's like 10, 20 new names to add.
Excellent.
So
well,
I think that's kind of cool.
Just hearing you talk that much is just a punishment to me, I guess. So.
Well, I know you're not a fan of my voice, so
that's why I asked you to help.
So, all right. So, aside to geographic and population, what's our next big thing to discuss about this world?
Okay, wastelands. So in between, not all of the mega cities, but there are huge swaths of what they call wastelands as well too, where anyone who are trapped out in the wastelands have become mutated, and which does sometimes give them powers, which is really cool. But it's also to me out there, I think more like it's. Out there, it's Fallout, and if it's too bare, maybe Fallout 76. I'm sorry, that was a mean joke. Sorry about that. I got distracted. But so you have these wastelands, and essentially the things in the wastelands are trying to get out of the wastelands, because whereas the cities are dystopian, most definitely, it's still better than living out in the blown up parts of the world. I know there's a big one in the United States, sort of. I think there's like a big mega city in Texas. I think there was a big one in LA that got blown up, or the West Coast. There is largely wasteland in between. And I think most of the Mediterranean and Middle East are pretty much all obliterated as well. And once again, if it's not grown up into a city, it's kind of cut off at this point. And the other interesting thing I found out too, which I did not know, was that actually it makes sense because it's in the future.
How far? Do you know the year?
I don't know the exact year, but from my understanding is they don't do restarts. So characters actually age. So Judge Dredd is actually exceptionally old, and I don't know if he still operates in the comic anymore as a judge. He might be actually retired. In the comic book, I know they do a lot with cloning and stuff like that, where so whoever's currently out there, it's like a clone of Judge Dredd probably. But
I know I remember for a very long time, I don't know if they didn't show his face or if showing his face was just an extremely rare thing, but there was a comic that I saw that had him take the helmet off. Mm-hmm. and it was like, oh, this guy's actually really old.
Yeah.
He's like creepy, wiry, like you ever see those guys who they probably never had much body fat on them their entire lives. Mm-hmm. So now they're like this old, sinewy, mostly muscle, but weird sort of person. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of what he looked like. That's the type of person he reminded me of. But also, I mean, in the comic books, he's obviously a royal badass.
Yes, he's a royal badass. And the interesting thing is, but they actually do have space travel. There are colonies in the solar system off of Earth at the point. At least now there are. I've never, any of the comics I saw has never gone there. So I don't know much about them. I think of them kind of like maybe a mixture between like the European colonies, but maybe more like the Greek colonies where they kind of go off and they're connected back to the city that the rocket ship came from, but they're basically on their own once they get out there. So it's somewhere in between that range of colony. The other there are only two races I could really identify, or things I would call races separate from human, which are mutants, which there are lots of varieties of, and then undead. And now, one of the few comics I bought has an undead character in there. One of my favorite villains of Judge Dredd, called Judge Death. Where the crime is life, the sentence is death. And you can't beat that quote,
Right.
So just think of your zombie with an attitude. It's sort of supposed to be sort of the unliving version of Judge Dredd, so to speak. But still a judge, which is interesting. And I believe they're actually from an alternate universe. They're not really Dredd.
Okay, so it's not like this is an alternate version of Dredd. It's a different judge altogether.
It could be, because it's from an alternate universe. So maybe it's a universe where everything's dead, and it would be what Judge Dredd was if he was undead, I guess. I'm not really sure too much on that. Like I said, actually, I had a comic with Judge Death, which I think I maybe bought it because of Judge Death. And that might have been what introduced me to Judge Dredd. And this was years ago, back in the BC, like 300 or something like that. But it is kind of interesting, though, that they haven't made a zombie version of Judge Dredd yet. I'm sure that will be out. Maybe we're a little past the zombie craze now. Maybe it's starting to temper off. But you figure, hey, we have a comic book, we could do undead. Let's just bring it on right now with all of the zombie stuff. Beyond a lot of what's going on, I think really kind of going back to the deal here is there are three really important things you need to understand for Judge Dredd. One, drock it. If you don't like it, drock it. Okay, that's just number one. Number two,
and that's like a swear in the
that's like the generic sci-fi swear. Drock it.
Like almost like frack.
Frack from Battlestar, I believe.
Frack hasn't been in way more than Battlestar. I don't think it originated in Battlestar. I've seen it in other things.
Well, it might have been in the original Battlestar too. So remember,
possibly
Battlestar is much older than Battlestar.
Well, no, I know that, but I don't remember the original Battlestar because my exposure to it was limited when I was a kid. So I really don't remember.
That's true. You're a little bit younger than me, so you were like forcing your parents to watch it.
Right. I know I watched some of it because the characters were very familiar to me, but
hopefully not the sequel. But that was a few years later. You were a little bit older. That might have turned you off to Battlestar completely. So
I tell you what, it took me a while to. Did I borrow them from you? Like I think I borrowed them from somebody.
I don't have the new series. Actually, I do have the original. I do not have the new series though.
I borrowed them from someone to check them out, and Sarah and I got way into it, and we couldn't borrow the next seasons fast enough. Like we watched like the first season, and then we're like, yeah, give us the next like 3. And like the weekend came, and we would just binge Battlestar.
Well, it's kind of like the mistake. It was when Chris and I first started streaming Netflix, or maybe it was still like even on DVD. We started watching. We kept hearing about 24.
Oh, I love that show.
And so we started watching it on Netflix because, it's here. We keep hearing how good it is. Let's check it out. Unfortunately, at that time, they were on season 7.
So you didn't know all the backstory?
Well, no, we didn't start watching the TV. We started watching season 1 on Netflix.
Oh, okay.
And 24 is exactly the wrong kind of show to watch on Netflix.
Why?
Because of how hook driven it is. So it's like every episode's a hook to the next episode. Every
because you'll sit down to watch one episode
and you watch
3 in the morning.
5 or 6 seasons of it. And
yes, absolutely.
So
but see, that's one of the reasons I like waiting for a show like that to get, because then when you're like watching, you're like, I'd have to wait a week normally. So nope, just hit play again.
I think the problem with consuming television or media that way, and this is something that we're missing, is we're going to start losing the fan theories, because you're not going to have enough time to come up with theories about big things happening in the season, because you get the whole season at once. You binge watch it. If you're slow like me, in a week. If you're like some people, over a 24-hour period.
Well, you know what though? You know what I like though is people will. And I was just reading an article about this. People, one of the bigger things in recent years is people will rewatch entire seasons of shows or entire series of shows, and they will try to redefine it. They'll be like, you know what the show is actually about? What if this? What if X was true? This is actually something that's true in the background, but we didn't know that. And then you rewatch the show and you're like, oh my gosh, it takes on completely new meaning under this, new theory.
Theory, yeah. That's maybe one way to fix that. But and Game of Thrones, I think, is going to be the last real show that we get the fan theory stuff out of, because it does come out over that span of time. So unless another show comes out like that, it comes out actually delayed. I like the idea of. But I think it gets you more consumed with it, because you sit there and your brain keeps going about it. And we lose that a bit when it's streamed. You still get a bit from season to season, but I don't think it's as strong as when you have a week to stress over 15 characters and what's going to happen to them.
Right.
So I do miss that in the life of streaming. However, I watch very little news, so.
I'm watching the Punisher right now, season 2, and oh my gosh!
I've not started that yet. I actually just started the new. What was it called? The Passage.
I've heard about that. I don't think I have access to it right this second. I've heard it's good though.
Yeah, it's on Fox. So is it Fox? It's just one of the television networks.
Right.
Luckily, I added it to the DVR on my PlayStation View. So. I have to watch the second episode or the first episode. I saw the pilot, was the only one that was out when I watched it. Okay, so back to Judge Dredd.
Well, I was trying to tie Dredd back in by mentioning the Punisher, since their characters are very similar.
You know who I think of more with Judge Dredd, and maybe this is just because I'm old. It's kind of like it's going back to my original synopsis of what the show is. It is Dirty Harry, if he lived in a dystopian a post-apocalyptic world.
That's not a terribly bad analogy.
Yeah.
I mean, Judge Dredd is like, he's an extreme, almost to the point of caricature of this, because of the nature of the character and the nature of the world. The thing that's common to get wrong is thinking that Judge Dredd is a good guy. He's who we root for. But he's by no means a good guy.
He is, if you're following the law.
Well, yes.
That's why it's dystopian, right? Because there's a lot of gray area in the law sometimes.
Right. Yeah. He kills people. You could say indiscriminately. You could also say
no. It would never be indiscriminately.
You could say super discriminately, because he, you broke the law, I can shoot you.
Yes. And, this is where like libertarian Jeff would get really, thinks this is very dystopian, in this idea where you have an individual who has the ability to make the judge, jury, and executioner roles all into one.
Right.
Is a very dangerous concept,
Oh, absolutely. Oh, yeah, it's terrible.
Believe in people, in the individual. But like I said, one man's dystopia is another person's utopia. So it just depends on what side of the law you're on. The interesting thing is the judges are extra nation state. They're not really like, the judges don't work for Mega City 1. They don't work for any of the mega cities. They are their own thing. I liken it to like the Order of the Templars. In history or in most fiction that deal with them, they were extra nation state. They did not have loyalty to any of the Christian kings, but to God himself. And really, in the days of Catholicism, to the Pope, and then, to God. And in the same way, you have the judges, where they have the chief judge that they, is the only person that they're responsible to, and there's no one above him. So it's sort of like a Pope-like character, the chief judge, where if you want the help of the judges to control crime in your horrible megacity, you have to give them whatever authorities that they want. And if you agree to what they say, they sign up and they go in and they will enforce the law. And I don't. the sentence is not always death, but it's quite frequently death. Let's be honest. And if a judge has to shoot you to protect themselves, and they kill you, there's no real recourse for you. I don't think. I don't think there's a Department of Appeals, but there are a couple important groups of the judges too. There is the street judges, which Judge Dredd is the most famous of, and several of his clones have been as well too. Judge Anderson, yay, because Dredd and Anderson won the fight. And then you also have the Special Judicial Squad, which is sort of like their SWAT team, I guess. So if a judge has trouble, they call in the SJS, and the SJS really, make the street judges probably look like they don't have enough firepower,
which is terrifying.
Which is terrifying, and which kind of brings you to the last thing, which is in a way more important, I think, than even Judge Dredd to the world, is the lawgiver. The lawgiver is the judge's gun, and the lawgivers, I know they're tied to the judges, I think, through an implant. They have different kinds of rounds. You push one button and you probably fire a nuclear missile and blow up half of a city block if you needed to. But it's but a very, what I think of as a cyberpunk style weapon.
Definitely. Yeah.
Which is, it's tied to the judge. So it's not like you're taking the pistol and shooting the guy with it. They're smart guns, or they're smart enough. But it's as iconic as the judges themselves are the firearms. The street judges, I don't know if they all have the bikes, but that's all I've ever seen in the comics have been motorcycles. But
the bikes are kind of a thing.
Yeah, so I think that's the main vehicle, which makes a lot of sense or whatever. But yeah, so that's really kind of all I have for Judge Dredd here.
All right, well, let me go for a little bit. So the Stallone Judge Dredd, the only reason that, the thing in the comic book was I honestly think they were thinking about Wolverine, is Judge Dredd, you almost never see his face. It's not common that you see his face. You only ever see his mouth, because the helmet covers up almost his entire face, except his mouth. So when Stallone got the role, it's kind of like, okay, well, you got this, huge AAA.
He looks great in the Max, though, I thought.
He does look great in the helmet, but the only reason that he took the helmet off is because he's Sylvester Stallone, and he's like, I'm not wearing the helmet the whole freaking time. People are going to see who I am.
Yeah.
Carl Urban has a smaller ego. And
I also think that the producers probably kind of preferred, if you have a AAA star, at the time he was near the peak of his popularity.
Oh, absolutely.
The executive producers also wanted
absolutely, no doubt at all. But with the newer one that's just called Dredd is much more faithful to the comic books, and I love that it's not funny. Well, actually, that's not true. There's a couple of little moments that are a little amusing, but not comedic. I mean, Rob Schneider is in, the Sylvester Stallone one. So come on. I mean, don't get me wrong. He had some funny moments, but this story, this tale, this world does not lend itself to that type of humor. And it to me, it was just a little bothersome because it's such an ultra violent, such a, well, I'm going to steal you using the word dystopian world, that kind of humor just, for me, didn't land right. So
it was a Sylvester Stallone 80s action movie.
Right. 90s.
Well, no, it was an 80s action movie. It was just in the 90s that it was made. You know what I'm saying? It was like that style. Fair that enough. sort of, especially like the late 80s was sort of its height. It was kind of like the music of the 80s. It didn't quite die out, until a couple of years into the 90s.
With one of the things that I really, really loved about the Carl Urban Dredd is that the whole movie takes place in a building. There's a
mega city. One of the blocks.
A block, yeah. There's a brief sequence in the very beginning of the movie that's outside of the building, and that's just him driving to the building. but the rest of the movie takes place in one building. And it gives you an idea of like, I mean, it's immense. It's like, oh, this is just like an apartment building, but it's like 100 stories. It's so big.
And like I said, literally, it's like the hospitals in there, every place you work, the movie theaters, the shopping, it's all in one place. And so, like I said, if you live there, in theory, you would never have to go anywhere else. Now, in reality, most people who go between buildings are probably criminals. Or the ultra rich, I'm sure probably, I don't know much about the ultra rich in the world of Dredd, if any, but I assume there are. If there are any that aren't crime lords, they probably move around a bit more. But to me, it seems like you don't even like. It's not like today where you would willingly travel from, the megacity one that is Manhattan, or the city block that would be in Manhattan, to the ones like near Toronto, unless you had a really good reason. Because I do think the city streets and outside of them are a bit more Wild West, and that's a lot of times in the comics where a lot more of the action takes place. Are like bandits on the road in the medieval times, sort of jumping you along the way.
If you are a Game of Thrones fan, getting back to Game of Thrones, Cersei plays the bad guy in Dredd, so that's always fun. Lena Headey, who is
that was I didn't recognize that. Yeah.
Oh yeah. That's her.
But I mean, there was some makeup involved, obviously.
Yeah, a little bit. But I mean, once I know, it's quite clearly her. Like the only thing they really did makeup wise is like her hair is real choppy. She's got a big scar across her face, and her teeth are like yellowed, and that's because she's a drug user. So, but it's like she's also like a tragic villain. She's one of these villains. It's like, oh, she's horrible, and she does horrible things, but you also have to feel for her because she's been through some really horrible stuff to get her to who she is now.
After doing our Grimdark episode, I'm thinking of a dystopian world as a Grimdark utopian setting.
That's not a bad way, because really there is nothing good in Dredd. There's no happy ending. There's no light at the end.
And even Judge Dredd is awesome and powerful, and he gets through missions, but it makes no difference.
Yeah. That's exactly right. It's really just, the happy ending is living to see another day. Like that's it. Like it's still terrible. Living in Mega City 1 is not a fun place to be. It's not a safe place to live. Everyone's just trying to steal or kill or get ahead. It's an awful place to be. But it's a fantastic action movie. I'm a huge fan of Dredd.
Yeah.
So definitely worth watching.
Yes, and when I'm a billionaire, I'll probably buy all the comics just to read them.
And Carl Urban said, like, there's been talk about making it a TV show for years now, and Carl Urban has from the get-go been
on board.
Oh, absolutely. He's like, absolutely, I would totally do it.
Yeah, I don't think you could afford Dredd, and I did see some discussion about that, and Dredd would, I think, be a character who interweaved into the movies, but it would be about other street judges, which I think is an awesome way to do it. So, because you can have a little bit smaller bankroll there. The actor who obviously is doing starring roles in motion pictures is a bit more expensive than other actors. So.
Well, you know what? It's
but
true.
He can still come in and be involved for storylines.
The thing is, though, like, I mean, how expensive could it really be? I mean,
I don't know.
While Carl Urban has helmed some of his own movies, Dredd being one of them, he doesn't do that a lot. He's usually a supporting role. He's not usually a leading man, which is surprising because he's excellent. I think he's a great character actor. Like I think he has.
Oh, he nailed the role. To me, that's what I envision when I read the comics.
Yeah.
And I would say he will show up, but as in a supporting character, as in coming into a storyline to help other judges. He won't be the main character in it.
Look, I mean, I was about to say, look, we're really hypothesizing here because I don't think they're even going to make it. I don't think the unfortunate truth is I don't think it's a popular enough property to merit more investment, which is why the movie didn't get a sequel. The movie didn't make a lot of money.
It should have.
It is a fantastic action movie, but not enough people knew about it, knew what it was, and were interested in going to see it. So, it didn't make a lot of money and subsequently didn't merit a sequel, even though it was excellent. It was really good.
But what we're hoping, and so I don't typically do a world building task in a real world task for episodes where we dive into other people's worlds, but there is one this time, and it is go watch that Judge Dredd movie.
Yeah, go watch Dredd
over and over again. And Netflix will end up making the series. So,
that would be grand. I don't know though. With they're hemorrhaging funding, that's why they've been canceling so many shows and increasing their. They wanted out the Marvel deal because the Marvel deal they were desperately needed the AAA to get the attention of the world with their stuff. So they probably got into a bad deal with Disney just to get the names. I don't think that's it at all. I think they just overextended themselves with all the new IPs they created.
Yeah, but
how many shows they created in the past 5 years? They have released so many TV shows and so many movies. That's a lot of outgoing money.
Yeah, but I mean, I know Daredevil brought in a lot of viewership to them. The other ones, I could see them dumping, but Daredevil actually did have quite a bit of people who watched.
Yeah, but I'm not just talking about the Marvel properties. I'm talking about tons of TV shows that you probably don't even watch and don't even.
I've never even heard of. Yeah, no, I agree with that.
Ton.
I'm talking specifically about the Marvel properties. When I'm talking about why they're canceling all of the Marvel properties, and if they've not announced it yet, they'll announce it within a month or so. There will be no. The Punisher will be canceled as well.
I know, which makes me sad. You're probably right, and I hate that because I loved the first season. I'm loving season 2.
Well, the interesting thing is Disney has talked about bringing part or all of them to the new streaming service they're coming out with.
You know what? I hope they do because I would hate to see this stuff die in the vine.
They would really need to rework Iron Fist.
Yeah, but Punisher is still growing. It does not need granted, I'm not finished with season 2. I don't know if they wrote it in a way to tie it up, knowing that the writing was on the wall. I have no idea. So I'm only halfway, not even halfway through season 2, and I just love that show. Love it.
All right, so go out, watch the Judge Dredd movie. I think it was 2012ish is when it came out. I literally ran out and made my wife go watch it the first weekend. And that was pre-Eric, so I don't know if I can get away with that anymore. But go out and just watch that one over and over again, or at least go check it out once.
Yeah, and if you need to, go to Amazon through our portal. So to www.garduel.com/Amazon and order Dredd through there.
So until next time.
Thanks for tuning in.
Thank you so much for listening to the World Builders Anvil.
We would love it if you would share the World Builders Anvil with 2 of your friends.
And so would they.
If they are unfamiliar with podcasts, then you get to introduce them to the wonderful world of podcasting.
Take them to Stitcher or iTunes, or best of all, just send them to our website, www.garduel.com.
That's GARDUL.com.
Now strike while the mithril's hot.